Hello, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. At Forte, we like to say this is the one time of year when the world focuses on what we focus on all year long, expanding opportunity for women and strengthening the connections that help all of us rise. This year's IW theme, Give to Gain, um, is a little bit of a challenge, right? Because most people think about give to gain and think philanthropy. But at Forte, we see this a little differently. We think about generosity as something that creates opportunity, not something that waits for it. When we share knowledge, advocate for one another, and make space for new voices, we multiply what's possible. And that's why today's speaker is such a perfect fit. Melody Wilding has spent more than a decade helping smart, thoughtful top performers at companies like Google, JP Morgan, and Verizon get the recognition, respect, and pay they deserve. She's a licensed social worker with a master's from Columbia. She's a professor of human behavior at Hunter College, and she's a former emotions researcher at Rutgers. Her work has appeared everywhere in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and she's a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Fast Company, and CNBC. She's also the author of Managing Up and Trust Yourself, two books that help professionals navigate the human side of work, which is exactly where generosity becomes catalytic. Please join me in welcoming Melody Wilding. Melody, so happy to have you.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for welcoming me. And I'm excited to be spending International Women's Day with all of you. Let me go ahead and share my slides and to be digging into our topic today, which I think Amy teed us up so beautifully. We're talking about give to gain and specifically reframing what self-advocacy means. So happy International Women's Day to all of you. Please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from today. I want to make sure you have the chat open as we're going along. I want to be hearing from you in terms of what's resonating, what's standing out to you, any additional ideas or insights you want to add. And as Amy was saying, this year's theme of International Women's Day is all about give to gain. It's all about reciprocity and support, and how when you invest in women's advancement, that does not just stop with one person. It ripples outward. And that also goes for yourself. We have all probably experienced firsthand here how powerful and even career changing it can be when you are on the receiving end of somebody else's generosity. Maybe it was a piece of advice, it was an introduction, it was a job referral, it was important feedback that made you better, right? It could be all of those things. Over the last 15 years, I have worked with thousands of driven, talented women. And if there is one thing I have seen over and over again, it's how quickly they will step up to lift someone else up, how they will champion an idea for someone who is very quiet, a peer of theirs or a team member, how they will go out of their way to spotlight someone else's work in a meeting, how they will advocate for a direct report to get a stretch assignment, right? Is this sounding familiar to all of you? You will so readily step up to lift someone else up. But then if you ask these very same women to talk about their own accomplishments or their own impact, that's where it stops. That is a big, fat nope. Nope, I'm not doing that. And they may deflect. And I want to say, just say me in the chat if you are guilty of this. If you deflect your accomplishments or water it down to say, oh, it was a team effort, right? I didn't do this alone. Everyone pitched in. The generosity that they give so freely to everyone else, they withhold from themselves. And I'm seeing a lot of you are relating to that. And this is absolutely not your fault. 100% not your fault. All of us here, we have been sold a lie. We have been given well-meaning advice that may have made perfect sense decades ago, but now may be the very thing that is holding you back, especially when it comes to your own self-advocacy in terms of your career. Give me a +1 if you have been told any of these things throughout your career. Let your work speak for itself. Keep your head down, do good work, you'll get noticed. The cream always rises to the top. You got to bide your time. Don't ask too many questions. Don't rock the boat. This may have worked fine. This sort of just keep your head down, do good work, you will be noticed. That mentality may have worked fine enough when you had one manager who could literally see what you were doing every day and knew exactly what you were working on firsthand. It may have worked when your team was small enough and you were all co-located in one place that everyone knew what everybody else was doing and why it mattered. But that's not reality anymore. For so many of you, you're working in highly distributed. You may work in multinational companies where you have never even met in person your boss or most of the people you work with. Workplaces are getting more complex. They are getting more competitive, more distributed by the day, sometimes by the hour. You can't control that. But there is good news here. You absolutely have the power to learn the skills that will set you apart in this environment to get your contributions seen, heard, and recognized in the way that they can and should be. And I want you all to hear this. Visibility is not optional anymore. We are living in a time, in a world where attention is everybody's scarcest resource. And a lot of people will tell me, I just want to be brilliant behind the scenes. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that phrase. Just want to be brilliant behind the scenes. But that now is the same as not being brilliant at all, right? It is the same as not getting noticed in any way. Your work cannot speak for itself. You have to be its best champion. And that's exactly why today what we're going to get into is cracking the code on self-advocacy. How do you stand out? The art, the strategy of getting your contributions respected and rewarded without turning into someone you're not. Because I know all of you here, we have folks from Nigeria, New York, let's see, let me scroll up a little bit. El Paso, Texas, London, Paris, Bryn Mawr, North Carolina, Toronto, Baltimore, Rhode Island, Cleveland, Northern Illinois, folks from all over the world, Alberta, Canada. And I know every single one of you does not want to turn into a conniving jerk, that sort of slimy kind of Wall Street character. And nothing we are going to talk about today is going to require you to turn into a political operator. Or if you are more introverted, quiet, thoughtful, reserved, I'm not going to ask you to turn into an extrovert overnight. You don't need to corner an executive when you see them, kind of back them up against a wall or in an elevator. You don't need to dominate in every meeting. You don't want to do that, and that is not what I am here to convince you to do. Self-advocacy, as I define it, is strategically amplifying what you're already doing. You are all doing great work every single day, but do people know about it? So this is about making your existing contributions and your existing effort visible to the people that need to see it in language that they will understand and at the moments where it is going to have the highest impact. We can be honest with each other here that as soon as we start talking about this topic of self-advocacy, for many of us, our mind immediately starts throwing up the roadblocks and the slow down yellow flags. Maybe it's imposter syndrome or self-doubt. I don't want to put my contributions out there because then people may start questioning them. And I don't know that I'll be able to justify them. People will see I'm not as smart or accomplished as I think I am. Some of us worry about perception. We don't want to be seen as having sharp elbows or being aggressive. And I hear this all the time, especially with women. I've literally spoken to people who are in marketing, who are in marketing and communications, who can sell other products, other businesses, but then struggle to market and package and present themselves. So before we even dig into strategies, we're going to do that. But before we do any of that, we have to first start with shifting our identity. The story we tell ourselves about why are we even doing this? Why are we even talking about self-advocacy? And shifting the story around what we believe we deserve so that we not only start to shift our thinking, but through that, we start to shift how we act, because you will always act in accordance with your beliefs, right? So if we start thinking in a way where we respect our own good work, we have the courage, we have the confidence to put it out there, then those braver actions are going to follow. All right. How many times have you had this thought? You can just say yes in the chat if this has gone through your head. If I advocate for myself, I'm going to look selfish. Team players don't take credit. I need to let a good leader lets their team take the spotlight. Here's the thing, and this gets right at our theme for International Women's Day. You have a duty to share your contributions. As I said before, visibility is not optional. It is not this optional extra you do on days where you feel particularly bold. It's as essential as anything else on your to-do list. And the reason for that is your leaders, your peers, your colleagues, they are not mind readers as much as we all wish they could be. They simply cannot see or keep track of everything you and your team are doing every day. So when you are quiet about your contributions, you are not being modest. You are actually withholding valuable information from the people who need it. So we all have a responsibility to keep other people around us informed about what's happening in our sphere. So far from this being about ego and us just wanting to puff our chest and say, look at how great I am, I want you to think of this more as arming the decision makers around you with a more complete picture that they need to make informed choices about staffing projects, which projects move forward, budgets, promotions, team direction. All of that benefits everyone. So this is the definition of give to gain. The second key shift is separating true self-advocacy from just straight up bragging. We often conflate these two. Now, bragging sounds like exaggeration. You know, it's the, well, without me stepping in, this project would have been a total disaster. That is self-aggrandizing, self-importance. But I'm willing to bet, and what I want all of you to focus on, I bet you're doing this already, but you're conflating it with bragging. I want you to focus on fact-based reporting, which is grounded in three things. Number one, accuracy, what actually happened. Number two, relevance, how it connects to current goals. And number three is context. Why do these results matter to the team or the organization? So let me repeat those. Accuracy, relevance, context. And this takes the pressure off. You are not having to sell or pitch yourself. You are just presenting information. And the focus then of self-advocacy moves from you as a person, and it shifts to focusing on the value and the result of the work itself and its impact. Now, when you have that sort of standout identity, as I said earlier, you recognize you have to be your work's best advocate. Because just think about this very practically. Who knows your projects better than you? Who understands the challenges that you have had to overcome, the solutions you've created? You are uniquely positioned to tell that story. And if you don't, someone else may tell it and they may not get it right. Or worst of all, it may not get told at all. So you don't want to leave that to chance. Being your work's best advocate means that you are shaping the narrative. You are guiding people's understanding of what you and your team have accomplished. And again, I'll go back to this one more time, why it matters. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room to get noticed. I've spent my career working with people I call sensitive strivers. That's what my entire first book, Trust Yourself, is about. So these are people who are deeper thinkers and feelers. You do not need to suddenly be extroverted overnight. If you are someone who is more quiet, more reserved, you can still make your mark. But there is a crucial difference between having a quieter personality and just being invisible. So I want you to think about it this way. Your impact is not measured by the volume of your voice. It is measured by how well others can grasp your contributions. And there are plenty of ways to do that without just grabbing the microphone or shouting it from the rooftops all the time. Because when you are someone who is truly confident in your abilities, grounded in your abilities and the value you bring to the table, you do not need to scream it from the rooftops or get on the loudspeaker about it. You do not need constant validation. You can calmly, clearly communicate your value in the right moments because you're secure in what you bring to the table. You don't need to inflate it. You are willing to share credit. So I like to say it's the difference between that sort of begging energy, that approval seeking energy of like, please notice me, please tell me I'm good enough, versus approaching self-advocacy from a grounded stance of, here's how I can help. Here's what we can offer you and how we complement each other. Totally different energy behind it. All right. Before we get into this, I would love to hear which of those mindset shifts stood out to you the most. What's resonating with you so far? Rial was saying all of it. Fantastic. Yes. And as I was saying before, it is so important to start here with the mindset piece because we will act consistently with the beliefs we have about ourselves. So if we are always thinking of self-advocacy as this slimy thing, we see these people who are executing it poorly and we don't want to be like them. Well, we're going to act consistent with that and not speak up at all. And that's the worst possible thing you can do. All right. You have to know your value first, taking the focus off of me, focusing it on the work, downplaying our accomplishments. Let's see. Guiding the narrative about what you and your team are accomplishing and why it matters. That is so important because people are so busy. And some of you may have seen some of the recent research that was coming out about AI and how it was supposed to be making work easier and faster, but it has just created more work and a higher volume of information and content. And this is especially true in the workplace, particularly with decision makers. They have more coming at them because now you can generate, now you don't just have a meeting, you have the full meeting summary that you have to do and the email recap and there's now this deluge of data. And so to be someone who is a sense maker, to be able to say, this is why this effort matters in that bigger picture. So remember those three things from earlier: accuracy, relevance, and context. That is a hugely valuable skill. Okay. Excellent. Now it was saying the volume of my voice does not define my experience. All right. So now that we've gotten this mindset piece in place, let's get into some tactics. And I like to call these the 4 S's of standout self-advocacy. And our 4 S's, we're going to go through each of these. Our 4 S's are store, structure, showcase, and strengthen. All right. Store, structure, showcase, strengthen. Some of you may be sitting here and saying, Melody, this sounds great for people who actually do have accomplishments, but you don't understand. I'm not one of those people who is just downplaying my achievements. It's not that I'm not confident. It's that I truly have not done anything impressive or noteworthy lately. Anybody feeling this? Just give me a +1. All right. Again, we can all be honest with each other here. I have been here before. You go on LinkedIn for a couple of minutes and you're like, what am I doing with my career? Everybody seems to be on top of the world. And so if you are having this, and thank you for those who are sharing that in the chat, I want to gently call BS on this. It is 99% of the time what I find is that you just have not trained yourself to look for and record the ways you have faced a challenge, the way you have created a solution or moved something forward towards a milestone, the great feedback you have received. This is a skill and a lens we need to train ourselves into. So that is where our first S comes in. And I was seeing some mentions of something similar in the chat, which is fantastic. You are all spot on. And specifically when it comes to store, I want to talk about creating what I call a story bank. And as I said, some of you were referring to that in the chat already, which is fantastic. Your story bank is a collection of documented anecdotes that highlight your skills. The beauty of this is a couple of things. You are prepared on the spot, whether we are talking about a one-on-one with your manager, a update you have to share, whether it's one to few, one to many, a anecdote to add value during a meeting, something you need to or want to pull out during a leader's office hours that you're attending. Your story bank helps you capitalize on those overlooked visibility opportunities. And that's a mistake many of us make when it comes to visibility is we think about those times that we're standing at the front of the room. I'll talk about this in a moment. And we only think of visibility as leading the all hands or speaking at a conference or something like that. And we overlook all of these smaller moments, the casual moments where you run into someone in the hallway or you're chit-chatting with an executive before others join the call. These are all great places to pull out anecdotes from your story bank. It also allows you to start to see and craft a more clear and consistent narrative about your career growth and your strengths. And most importantly, I would argue, is that it starts to retrain your confidence. Instead of looking at everything that is not getting done, the ways you have not felt up to snuff, it boosts your confidence. You see evidence of all the progress you are making, even through the most difficult times. I have a client right now who's been going through a very difficult situation with a stakeholder who has been excluding her and just been incredibly difficult for 6-8 months now. And we were talking about this question of how is this situation for me instead of against me? That is one of my favorite coaching questions. How is this situation for me instead of against me? And even reflecting on some of the anecdotes, the stories about how she has had to deal with this person in public meetings, for examples, or build other relationships because this person has been cutting her out of the situation. Those are skills she is going to carry with her wherever she goes next, and likely that she wouldn't have had to form if the situation had just been, sunshine and rainbows without that. So your story bank can be a powerful reflective tool where that is concerned as well. This does not have to be a big thing. I recommend setting aside maybe 10, 15 minutes max, usually at the end of every week. I find this is a good way to close out the week and to reflect on just a few very simple questions. What went well this week? What are you proud of? And what were your moments of strength? How did you handle a problem or a challenge differently than you might have in the past? Because even if you don't get the outcome you hoped, so much is out of our control in today's workplaces and our careers. So you will not always get the outcome you hoped. There is still value there. And especially for those of you who are rising the ranks in your career, the more important it becomes to show how you are navigating ambiguity, complexity, and to showcase your thinking through those types of situations. Because visibility isn't always about what you accomplished. That's a big part of it, what you accomplished. But it's also bringing people along with how you did it, showing your rationale, your thinking, how you diagnosed a situation. That becomes more and more important. Again, your story bank does not have to be fancy. I work with a lot of overthinkers who tend to over-engineer things. So I want to literally give you a snapshot of what this might look like. A simple spreadsheet works great. And here's an example. You can see a date. You may put a short story title just so you know what it is. What happened in 2 to 3 sentences? What was the challenge or the situation? What was your role, or what was the approach that you took? Why did it matter? What was the impact? Why was it meaningful to the business? So you want to think about not the first order effect. The first order effect is here's what I did. I completed this report, for example. A second order effect is, why does that matter? What was the downstream or a domino effect of what that report created? It helps us, it informed the client so they can make a more confident buying decision and renew with us. It is going to help the analytics team move faster on this project, right? That's a second order effect. And then last, I also like to add this column over here about skills demonstrated. This will come in really handy when you are, for example, working on your performance review and you're having to trace things back to KPIs or OKRs or objectives that you were highlighting. Also, if you do make a change, then being able to highlight certain skills in your resume. Once you are paying attention to and logging your stories, as I said, this is a new lens you want to see your work through. Then the question becomes, okay, what do I do with this? How do I share it? And specifically, what do I say in a way that is concise, that inspires respect, that is not me just kind of rambling or feeling like I'm reciting my resume or sounding inadvertently big-headed or like I'm taking all the credit for something. So that is our second S, structure. That is your secret advantage here. Attention spans are painfully short, right? We have the TikTokification of everything. And so there is research to show maybe it's not as short as a goldfish's, but current attention spans are about under 30 seconds. So think about that. We can't even capture somebody's attention for a minute. Because of that, structured stories are easier for you to remember and for the person on the other end to comprehend. Because our brains are already overloaded, we have to make it as cognitively easy as possible. Brevity also signals you have mastery of your topic. Studies show that more concise communicators are perceived as more likable and competent. And when you are able to summarize something crisply, you are respecting your listeners' time, which is very much appreciated if you are talking about busy higher ups, peers of yours who are slammed and pulled in 10 different directions. So in my book, Managing Up, there are several storytelling frameworks I share, but there are two in particular that I want to highlight for you today. The first of those is problem, action, solution. So PAS, problem, action, solution. You begin by introducing the problem you were facing, just a little bit about the set the stage, emphasizing the impact that it had on the company, your team, your stakeholders. Then you say the action you took, why it mattered, and what the solution was. So in this case, over 60% of our customers were canceling or not renewing, and that was putting pressure on sales. I saw an opportunity to improve retention, and along with Jessica and Nick, we launched a re-engagement campaign. That ended up cutting our churn by about a third, which now means higher customer satisfaction and a boost in our profits. Let's take another example, problem, action, solution. We were having trouble keeping track of client communications, so we had more delays and miscommunication than we would like. After researching the best platform, I worked with the operations team to implement a CRM and coordinated with the vendor to make sure the entire team was onboarded. Our turnaround time is now much faster, about 40%, and the team can find everything in one place instead of spending extra time digging through emails. Notice here how both of these examples balance your contribution, here's what I did, and teamwork. Your specific contributions are sort of nestled in between the shared challenges, the collective wins and success. Because let's face it, I fully understand everything in this world is a team effort, and no one likes a credit hoarder. Most leaders, they are looking to promote and advance people who are both team players and self-starters, not one or the other. They want both. That brings us to our second framework. This is a fan favorite. And someone was asking, what book is this from? It is from my newest book. It's called Managing Up. Very simple, Managing Up. And the second framework is called We, Then, Me. And this helps you strike that balance between teamwork without losing your individual effort. Because that's what can happen with women in particular, as I said before, is that we can over-index on deflection and cutting ourselves out of the equation to the point where people start to question or don't fully grasp and understand, well, what did you contribute? And when that happens, then they don't know how and when for us to be top of mind or referred for certain opportunities. They may even start to question, do we actually need this role? So we need to balance those two things. So we, then me, you talk about the group's efforts first, followed by your contribution. Our new website launched last week. Everyone really pulled together well to make sure we got everything live. Carlos and Zena were very helpful in testing all of the features. I went ahead and took the extra step to write up a month's worth of content to make sure we're ahead of our production schedule. Another example, the pitch to Acme agency went really well. Everyone delivered their sections flawlessly. The client was really impressed with our market research. I really enjoyed working on the competitive analysis piece, and the client seemed very excited about the white space opportunity. Sounds like they're interested in moving forward. All right. Our next S is showcase. Numbers. Numbers can take your stories from vague claims. This was great. We did really well. Numbers can take it from those vague types of claims to concrete evidence. Because when you say something like, well, we improved efficiency, it doesn't really mean much. It's hard for someone to wrap their head around what that is or to understand the scope and scale. When you mean increased efficiency, did we do one thing faster or 1,000 things faster, right? Instead, if you say, we cut processing time for claims 25%, that is so much more stickier. And it's more visceral. Someone can imagine it and wrap their head around what it means. And as I was saying, it also signals scope and scale, the scope and scale that you are operating at. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. There is a big difference between just saying, yeah, I managed a successful campaign last year, versus saying, I led a campaign with a $2.1 million budget that reached over 100,000 users across 3 different markets. Totally different signal in terms of the level you are operating at, the complexity that you oversee. That immediately signals you handle bigger responsibilities, more resources, and lots more. So some things you can ask yourself, how do you actually get at some of those numbers? And we'll talk about what do you do if it's hard for you to quantify things. We'll get to that in just a second. But you want to be thinking about questions like this. Have you increased sales, your client base, productivity for the team? Have you created affiliations, partnerships, strategic alliances? Have you saved or created the company money? Have you designed or put in place new systems, processes, products, policies? Did you meet a tough deadline because there was extra effort involved? Have you taken on responsibilities that are outside of your job description or completed any special projects? What were they? What was the result of that? So you always want to be thinking about what did I do, but also what was the downstream outcome? And some of you might be thinking, but I don't have a job that deals with a lot of numbers. There are a few workarounds for this. Number one is you can provide a range. So you can give your best estimate. It's totally okay to say, we touched about X many deliverables between January and July. An approximation is much better to say than no number at all. So in this case, we've saved accounting roughly between 60 to 90 hours. It doesn't have to be an exact figure. You may not be able to get that data, but a range can be totally acceptable. You can also highlight the frequency with which you do something. Do you do it daily, weekly, monthly, for example? I've assumed responsibility for troubleshooting our customer service queue twice a day for the last 6 months. Again, it gives me an understanding of the scope and the scale of what you are doing. Compare and contrast. So now I know Tashana was sharing using Microsoft Copilot, which is an excellent use case for this. AI can be another great research partner in terms of finding, are there industry averages or any stats out there that you can use to compare and contrast to peg your results and outcomes against that of peers, competitors, industry standards. And also, don't forget that while there is quantitative data, which is generally speaking numbers, there is also qualitative data. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But I don't want you to forget that if you are in a role that truly has no numbers, although I don't think in my entire career I have worked with someone where we couldn't find some quantification that they could point to. But qualitative data is also very powerful. Can you illustrate something as a case study, for example? That's a way to show progression and to show results that doesn't depend on saying, well, we increased this 25%. All right, our last S is strengthen. Strengthen by leveraging social proof. When others vouch for your work, it's more powerful than anything you could say for yourself. Decision makers, and a very important thing to understand is that they naturally want to minimize risk. And hearing that someone else has already benefited from your work, that provides them reassurance. That helps bring down the level of risk. So it's the difference between saying, I'm great at this, trust me, just believe me that I'm great at this with no other evidence, versus here's what our last three cross-functional partners have said about working with our team. One is just a claim that you are hoping someone buys into and believes, and the other is more evidence-based. That is the power of social proof. So there are many different ways that social proof can look. I want to give you some ideas. And of course, why I'm giving you so many options is because one of these may stand out to you more than the other, and you say, oh, I'm gonna use that. So even if it's one little tip or one little change you make, that is success here. So you could forward positive emails. When someone sends you a great job, really appreciated that type of note, thank you for your help on this, you may consider forwarding it to your manager or the lead of a team and saying, thought you would appreciate seeing this feedback on the recent project. They were really pleased with it, or it was great to see the ideas were well received. It is a wonderfully subtle way to reinforce that your work is getting results without bragging. You are just sharing information that your boss, your leadership would like to know, and could also benefit them sharing with their own superiors. So in this case, the spotlight is staying on the work while also making sure that secondarily your contribution is getting noticed without you having to emphasize, look at all the great things I did. Selective, tasteful name dropping. When you do this, it shows that you are collaborating with key stakeholders, and that can help imply their tacit respect, endorsement, buy-in, support of your thinking. So you can build credibility, cachet by virtue of who you are associating with or working with and who trusts you. So for example, I was reviewing these results with Maria from finance, and we realized this approach could work across different verticals. Or I ran this by some credible colleague, and they thought it addressed the key concerns we've been facing. That can help shortcut someone's, or rather short circuit someone's skepticism, because you have mentioned this other person that you respect or that you've worked with before. They have validated or reviewed this, and that can help shortcut some of the questioning they may have for you. Okay, you can also feature testimonials. This is most often the most obvious use case we think when we talk about social proof. And social proof, it's so commonly used in marketing. When you go to someone's website and you see all those banners for logos people have worked with or partners that they've had, customer testimonials, reviews, that is all social proof. It's tapping into this psychology of we want to do things other people have found useful. And so in your case, that may including actual client quotes in your testimonials or your presentations, right? This exceeded our expectations. Maybe if it's permissible, you have a screenshot or something like that. And then last, also along the lines of what I was referring to, leveraging logos. So emblems, prestigious partners you have worked with. Maybe it's even, there may be a situation where maybe even including universities or trainings that people from your team have attended, or certifications that people have, can be very helpful to make sure those are front and center with what you're doing. And this taps into something, a psychological effect that's called the halo effect. So if you think about a halo, right, we automatically transfer positive attributes from one thing to another thing that is associated with it. So in this case, we automatically, if we have a positive feeling towards the Project Management Institute, for example, we make positive associations with the people connected with them, with people that are certified by that body, for example. So this is why when someone sees logos they know of big companies, industry leaders in your materials, their brain makes that instant association between those organizations and your credibility. Oh, you've worked with organizations like that? Okay, great. Oh, you've had sponsors at your event like that? Fantastic. This almost happens subconsciously before we're even processing what happens. Because especially when it's visual, it can almost bypass that more logical part of our brain. We process it in seconds. All right, those are our 4 S's: store, structure, showcase, strengthen. I would love to hear which one of these is standing out for you the most. Which one of these are you feeling like that's the one I have realized I need to work on? So remember, with store, we talked about documenting your accomplishments using a story bank. Structure is about how do you use items from that story bank and craft them into a compelling narrative. So we had problem, action, solution framework, as well as we, then me. Showcase. Now, how do you take what may be a vague or kind of soft accomplishment and apply scope and scale to it so someone actually understands the magnitude and the impact of what you have done? And last is strengthening, leveraging those different levers of social proof to bypass someone's skepticism or to create trust faster. Okay, let me take a look here at what's coming in. Of course, yep. So I see we have people all over the gamut here. A lot of store, which makes sense. Structure, showcase, amazing. Megan was saying, with store, I set myself a task this year to write down everything additional I'm doing on top of my other work set out in my goals. Excellent. Yeah. And like I had said before, I gave you a lot today. So if there is just one tidbit you focus on, that's fantastic here. That is a win. If there is one nugget you focus on. Now, this idea is something I want to leave you with. We have covered a lot today. We talked about those 5 shifts for standout identity. We talked about those 4 S's for strategic self-advocacy. Everything comes down to this idea. You teach people how to treat you. I will die on this hill. You teach people how to treat you. When you speak up, you are setting the tone for how you want to be perceived in the workplace. You send the message, I'm someone to be taken seriously. I take myself seriously, and therefore it can influence others to react to you similarly. Think about how when we are skittish or when we are diminishing ourselves, right? And we feel like, oh, I don't want to say too much, right? Someone was saying here, I'm so used to diminishing myself. Other people pick up on that. And I often liken it to this. Like I was saying before, I work with a lot of people who are bigger feelers. And I will often get the question, what do I do if I get emotional and I cry in a meeting? And I will say the worst thing you can do is start apologizing for it and cowering, right? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so embarrassing, right? Other people pick up on that. But if you respond to it with, okay, I understand this is not the news I wanted to hear. And at the same time, I'm having an emotional reaction because I care about this. Totally different response that you might get from somebody else, right? Because you are grounded and strong and confident. So you teach people how to treat you. It seems like that's resonating with a lot of you. If you enjoyed today's session, I'm going to put a link in the chat for you. Give me 1 second. I have created something special for all of you. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second to grab that link because it escaped me. But I have created something special for all of you here, which is what I call the Speak Scorecard. So if you are looking to take action on today's session, I know there are many of you here who have joined with your ERG or your team or others from your workplace. Your next step is to take the Speak Scorecard. This is going to give you a personalized snapshot of where your communication is strong and where and why your self-advocacy might be falling flat, so that you can start to close that gap to make sure you are getting the respect and recognition you deserve. If you are here from an organization and you have people who are here live, you have people who are watching the replay, please do encourage them to take it. This will remain open even after this session is done. So if you are catching this on replay, all you have to do is head to melodywilding.com/speak-scorecard. You'll receive the results in about 5 or 10 minutes, but please allow up to 15 just in case, the internet gnomes can do certain things. And in the confirmation email that you get, there will also be several discussion questions. These are things you can do on your own, just as a personal self-reflection. But as part of International Women's Day, myself and Forté, we want to encourage all of you to do these as a group or a team. So those will be included in the email. And in a few days, myself and my team, we will be looking at your organization's aggregated results. I'll be looking out at what are standout themes, and I'll be reaching out to share insights with you and to explore whether some of you have already said we may be interested in additional training on this. This would be great to bring to our ERG or coaching, or if a team debrief will be helpful. So we'll be reaching out about that. I'll put this link in here again. Excellent. Okay. And we have some time for questions. So let me see. Nora, thank you so much. That means a lot. She was saying this has been one of the best webinars I've attended. That is very kind of you to say. I'm so glad. Excellent. Okay, what questions can I answer for all of you? So I know some people had asked, is this being recorded? Will there be a replay? And yes, there will be. So we know a lot of people can't make it live or have to leave halfway through or join halfway through. So yes, there will be a replay that you are also welcome to share with others on your team. Yes. Nicole was asking, what about self-advocating on social platforms like LinkedIn? Any quick suggestions? Fantastic question, Nicole. That we then me framework is a great one that can work for LinkedIn posts. So especially if you're, okay, I'll give you an example. I had a client a few months ago who organized a, how do I explain this? The work that she does requires partnerships with underserved communities throughout the country. And so as part of that work, she organized basically a field trip for her team to go out and visit one of those locations and see hands-on the work that their organization was doing, how it was affecting the community. And it was really wonderful. It was just great for everyone to actually connect with the work on the ground. And so she went on LinkedIn and did a we then me-esque post where it was a picture from the event and said, the X team is so glad we had the opportunity to visit this location, and it has been a joy working closely with these people. I have felt especially honored to be leading this part with the initiative, along with my colleagues who are doing XYZ pieces. So that can be a great way to be highlighting your work using that me, then we structure. Okay, let's see. I'm scrolling through the comments, everyone, so thank you. Justine, how would you navigate a situation where there is no formal performance review in a company? That is an excellent question. Okay, couple thoughts here, depending on the culture of the organization and what you think might be possible is you could, Justine. Oh, there's so many things running through my head. I'm thinking where to go first. What I have had clients do in the past is create a DIY 360. So I have had, and this was something I provide to my clients, is using a 360 assessment I had created, asking about 5 to 7 colleagues to comment on that in terms of their communication skills, collaboration, strategic thinking, all areas like that. And they collated those results and they proactively presented it to their manager to say, I went out and I solicited this feedback. This is what I heard. Based on this, the areas, well, actually backing up, based on this, it's clear the other teams have valued X, Y, and Z, these accomplishments, right? And the other thing I hear is the areas for improvement are these other things. And so they have almost created their own review process. And you might be able to do something like that yourself to say, hey, I know we don't have a formalized review process. Are you open to, if every 6 months we earmark one of our one-on-ones to talk about career development and how that's going? What I will also say is something I teach in my program. It's called Speak Like a Senior Leader, is a format for your one-on-ones where your one-on-ones should always start with successes. That may sound obvious, but most people start with status updates. They start with, okay, here's where this is at. Here's where that is at. This is what we're doing next. That doesn't have as much value as starting with an outcome-based success. That is, over the last 3 weeks, we've been working with this cross-functional partner, and we identified the root cause for why we've been hitting this bottleneck. As a result of that, I put in place this new thing, right? That is so much more accomplishment-based. So your one-on-ones should be starting with that week to week. Okay. Okay, Monique asked, the problem that I have is thinking that my accomplishments are normal and not significant. How do you shift from that to be able to take stock, to now take stock of accomplishments? Yeah, Monique, I do hear this a lot of, I'm just doing my job, right? I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. Even a couple of things. What I find is, I'm going to guess for the vast majority of those of you who are joining us today, your 80% is most people's 100%. So there is a self-perception gap here. But more importantly, even if we just go with the thought and believe the belief that what you are doing is normal and you are just doing your job, it is still important and an obligation you have to keep the decision makers around you apprised of the fact that you are doing your job and that things are getting done. I have unfortunately seen people put on performance improvement plans because they were not communicating that they were doing their job. They were not communicating when they were thinking. One person in particular who was in the background, she was very quietly and silently following up with clients and trying to work on these dashboards. She wasn't communicating any of that. So it created this vacuum where, in the absence of any information, her leadership was like, is she doing anything? And I'm worried they're not doing X, Y, Z, and you haven't followed up with ABC. And so there is still the obligation to keep people aware of what you are accomplishing. Okay. All right, we have a few minutes left. Let me take a look at this. Okay, and let me hop over to the Q&A as well, in addition to the chat. So let me see. Okay, someone asked, I'm an extroverted introvert. I need my space to recover. I can be really open, talkative, tending to lead, but afterwards I tend to see myself as too dominant. How do we find the balance between stepping up and showing ourselves and collaboration? A couple of things. So you don't always have to be the one with the most groundbreaking idea in a meeting. When I'm working with people that tend to be more introverted, it's very helpful to be someone who builds on somebody else's idea, which again takes the pressure off of you to have this mind-blowing insight. And it also makes sure you are being collaborative. So building on what Jake said about this, another point or another dimension I would add is that, and also forget or don't forget that there's not always going to be an opportunity to speak up in a meeting. It just may be structured so tightly that you don't have the chance to speak up or the opportunity doesn't present itself. There is always the follow-up. I think many of us we get in, I call it conversational perfectionism, where we feel like this is the moment. This is the moment. And if I don't speak up and I don't do it in the most perfect, right way, then I've blown my chance. But we forget that the most successful meetings are forged before and after. And so even if you don't have the opportunity to speak up in the meeting, there's always circling back and saying, I was thinking about what we were talking about there, and something that stood out to me that I wanted to add and didn't have the chance to is blah, blah, blah. And that is another way. You will be surprised by how often decision makers come back to you and say, that's a really excellent point. Would you put together a slide for next time? Or can you grab 20 minutes with me to dig into that more deeply? So
Melody, I think we have time for one more question.
sure.
But I also want to really encourage people to purchase Managing Up. It is such a great read, and a lot of people were talking about the power of your material, and I just wanted to remind them that they could get it through the book. But one more question, Melody.
Yes. Let's see. I'm trying to pick one. What are some of the best ways to strengthen your connections through sharing your work? I'll be fast on this one. One of my favorite go-tos is telling people how they helped you. And so this may be, again, following up after a meeting where there was an executive or a senior leader sharing a thought and saying, it really struck me and I really appreciate what you mentioned about blah, blah, blah. That relates to the work we've been doing on this project. We've already seen some great gains from it. So you are acknowledging how someone shared a helpful insight or advice and also contextualizing it in some of the accomplishments you have been able to achieve.
Melody, I have to say, this has been amazing. And what a powerful example of the IWD theme of give to gain, because you gave of your time, your knowledge. You created a scorecard assessment for our Forte audience. It's just phenomenal, and we cannot thank you enough. If you can't see by the chat, which is blowing up with how much they appreciate you, we really love this. And for those of you that are new to Forte, if you didn't know us before, Melody is an example of what I like to refer to as a friend of Forte that often pops in and shares their knowledge and their resources. As well, we have a host of professional development. So my colleague Alexia has been putting it in the chat. You can go to our website, www.fortefoundation.org. And once again, if you're not already typing in the chat, I please encourage you to show Melody your appreciation. And I know what I'm going to do when I get off of this webinar, which is take the assessment. So I can't wait. But Melody, thank you so, so much for making IWD 2026 so special for Forte.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all for your time, your attention, to the Forte team for having me. A real pleasure.